today I have the honor and privilege to welcome our guest of the day, who is Dr. Sunita Gandhi. She is an educator, author, innovator, and researcher. She is the founder of Council for Global Education, USA, Dignity Education Vision International India, and the Education Society of Ireland. She has traveled and studied education systems in 39 countries. Her vision-led mission in education has been guided by her scientific training. Her work based on the principle of compete with yourself has appealed to educators worldwide, and her nurture school affiliations and franchisee partnership programs aim at school transformation. Ma'am, it's an absolute honor to have you over here with us, and we cannot wait to ask a few questions and have them answered by you. The first question that I have for you is, where do you think the education industry is heading amidst the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, we are definitely headed towards more access of education to the children at large. We know that in our country we've had that persistent issue of reaching out to every single child, the last child. We're also probably headed towards better quality because things are more transparent, more available through the net. We are probably also going to be able to address greater and broader sets of issues like health, the psychology of the child. Technology means new opportunities and more advanced opportunities. And without being prepared, we've been thrust in it due to the COVID. So I think the equation will change and will change dramatically. And if it doesn't, it's our loss. This is a God-given opportunity in the form of a crisis.
It's more like you have to look at the silver lining over there and make the best out of it that we can. Okay, ma'am, we know that you have studied education systems in 39 countries, which is huge. And what do you think, what does the Indian education system lack or exceed when compared to others?
Right. In my traveling across the world, I find first and foremost a lot of similarities across the countries. I think we have been brought up on the 19th century notion of education. So as far as how India is doing in relation to the world, I think let's look at what is the vision for education and then give ourselves our own report card. So, for example, I would say that the four most essential building blocks of education are values or universal values. This is my first parameter of success. To what extent are we as educators in India and elsewhere being able to empower spiritual values and the spiritual perception by which they can go and proceed into the world beyond the K-12 education? And to what extent are our children walking out of the portals of a school with a sense of values, knowing right from wrong? And I think you can give yourself a measure of that for your own school community, if you're an educator, for your own children. To what extent are we empowering children in the sense of values? Second is global understanding. That is that every child becoming not just coexistence, but a lover of humanity. So they embrace diversity in all its forms. They look after the environment, animals, plants, you name it. And if you have that understanding, a deeper understanding of the world, you can hold the one world phone, but are you connected to the world in the sense of the heart? Do we accept diversity in all its forms? And if not, we are failing in our purpose under global understanding. Third thing is excellence in all things. I think we can say that all the schools stand for excellence, but excellence has been defined very narrowly over the years. And it's the 19th century definition, all material success, at the end, it's money rather than morals. And so what does an education which is excellent represent? So every school says we are a great school, we are the best school of the city, but what does best mean? So here we would redefine it as perhaps three things. Number one, that you are seeing every child, visualizing every child as a successful human being and the likes of Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln. Where are the children of courage and conviction? Where are the people of courage and conviction? So this comes from an education that visualizes a far better outcome, a tree which is fruitful and laden with fruits and benefits for society. So one is visualization. We don't visualize them in that way. We give them report cards that merely measure marks on a sheet, and we don't really aspire or give an aspirational education that drives them into a very excellent human being, which they're capable of, but our education is perhaps not able to reach us to that level. It also means competing with yourself, as you rightly said, not about competition with others. But then mainstreaming that principle is probably not so easy for schools to do. What does it mean not to compare children with each other? Because that minimizes their potential. The third thing is focus on beauty and perfection. And I think we are too rushed. You know, the handwriting goes for a song. We are just syllabus pushing. We are not really focusing on beauty and perfection. Because when we create beauty and perfection through excellence in all things, that pillar of learning, I think we create more beauty in the world, we create more excellence in the world, and we create something within the child, which is also very necessary, the anchor within the child. The fourth building block, again, you can measure how excellent are we. If all children are succeeding, if all children are doing excellent on their mark sheets, if every child is feeling capable and competent of the highest success, then we can give ourselves truly a grade A. On this third measurement, if you like, of the four building blocks. The fourth building block is service to humanity, and service is a very necessary sentiment to develop in children from the earliest ages. Are we creating children who are proactive leaders of change? And if they're not, then we have our job cut out. That empathy and love the children have in their hearts, they need to go and express it.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So what is our report card? It's up to us to tell. You know, now you can say whether we're measuring against it really well or not. These are the new measures. And I'd also like to say that we need to give an education, a good education, is one that integrates research-based practices and uses evidence. There's a lot of good evidence out there, work that's been done in countries all over the world, which is really important to look at before we go and make the errors by focusing or following our hunches rather than our evidence, and creating new evidence for our own country, our own nation. So, clearly Australia, Finland, these are some of the countries that are using evidence-based practices, and the education has shown its really profound results.
Dr. Gandhi, we would love to know a little about your project, Global Dream, which is aimed at providing functional literacy to the illiterate masses. It would be great if you could throw some light on that.
Right. Well, Global Dream is a dream of a literate India. When I was working for the World Bank in Washington, I was very keen to get back to India and to work on literacy of the illiterate, because the idea of literacy is important, is pertinent in order to create a sense of dignity in a person. And when a person feels dignified, when they feel, oh, I'm capable, then they are able to make a difference in their own lives. So they become themselves the propelling force for change. India is the least literate country in the world. It takes 6 to 8 months to make a person literate at the basic level, and even after 6 to 8 months, they can barely just write their name, and that's not adequate, and sign their name. That's not adequate at all. Approximately 5 years of education in our schooling yields only 50% of children after grade 5 can read a grade 2 text, which is absolutely inadequate. 25% of them walk out of grade 8 without the basic reading skills. So obviously they add to the pool of the illiterate masses. So we can go on. But what I have been developing through Global Dream is a scale-up model on literacy, which is 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper, because we need something which is dead easy for anyone to use, including children, to go make somebody literate. Plus, people who are poor, they don't have the time like we do in a way. We have the luxury of time, we have options. They don't have that. They have to put all their time into survival and feeding their families. So for them, giving a little bit of time is very difficult. So obviously, one of the things we're focused upon is how to make just 15 minutes a day count, and in a month to make somebody reading capable. And that's entirely possible using Global Dream toolkits, which we worked on. And we've tried all sorts of models of replicating that experience. Like, for example, in a village called Karoni, we've had 22 women who have done a gallant job and shown us that community members can bring about literacy in their own villages. They made 800 women literate. It's been covered by Better India. They've made themselves, those people, literate. Yeah, isn't that amazing? And they've done it without any expenditure on our part. We just trained them. We gave them, these kits, and we empowered them. We just went and said hello to them a few times, and we acknowledged their work, and that's all. And they feel so proud of the fact that they have accomplished this for their village. They're respected in their village. They feel they are teachers now, and these are people with very minimum of education. So I think Global Dream is one way to make India literate. But there's only, if you look at worldwide evidence, there's only one way in which a country can accelerate and become literate. And for India, this is also experience from Ernakulam, which was 30 years ago, where within a matter of 1 year, the entire district of Ernakulam became literate. So if we expand their experience from other countries and from the pages of Ernakulam and other parts of the country, we have 3 lessons to bear. First and foremost, that you cannot accomplish a people's movement, which is what's needed to make India literate. We cannot have that unless there's government commitment, solid commitment, to bring about a people's movement. And that means basically leadership and leadership on their part. And then the second precondition of a people's movement is a time-bound mission in which all stakeholders are involved. And to make that a priority, like for example, we did with the polio mission. Everybody in the private segment, schools, universities, everybody got involved in the polio mission, and we eradicated polio from the country. And that was a people's movement in which government played a leadership role. The third precondition, as we've seen in other countries also, is simplified learning materials or teaching learning materials. So here we've got Global Dream. We've tried and tested it, where children from schools in 9 different states of India, some 4.5 million students, have made people literate. So this is entirely possible with this particular methodology.
Dr. Gandhi, you just said that India is the most illiterate country in the world, and people don't actually have the luxury of time over here. But due to the whole COVID-19 health crisis, people don't even have the luxury of technology. But the COVID-19 pandemic has actually rather forced the universities and educational institutions, not only in India, but worldwide, to actually their method of teaching from face-to-face teaching to online or virtual teaching. So do you think that e-learning can someday actually take the place of traditional classrooms, especially in a country like India, considering the pandemic?
Why do we need the children to come to school every day? We are in the 21st century. Technology is a blessing in disguise, and I think we should embrace it. Schools have typically remained behind other sectors that have embraced technology. I think you can see these platforms where you can connect with 3,000 people, 5,000 people at a time. So why not use the best lecturers, the best teachers, and let them deliver the lessons online? Online learning has its benefits, and of course there are many other things we need to do in a blended learning environment that go beyond just the use of technology. But technology, I think we should embrace. There are lots of advantages. For example, learning can be staggered, not to return to physical everyday classroom experience. We need classroom for what? There are many other things or benefits of being in a classroom situation, which can be blended with technology. So for example, we need to teach children the social skills, because a child is a material being, a child is a social being, and child is a divine being. So for material education, we can cover a good part of it, not all of it, through technology, through online methods. we can save a lot of time, we can save a lot of money, we can have the best of education available, and not just nationally but internationally. People can be brought on that forum to teach our children in their homes and in the schools. Then because the child is also a human being, we need to give them a social education. So if we are going to teach children sitting in a class and we standing in the front with a with our chalk and board methodology, or even with a whiteboard, but we're sticking to the board in the front and we're teaching a whole class more or less every single day in the same old modality, I think we're not teaching them the social skills. So there are more profound questions that we need to dwell upon, like how to make schools focus more on acquisition of social skills. So like teamwork and project-based learning and so forth. The third thing is divine education. I think it has to be the centerpiece, the core skill that we have to teach our children. So how can schools do this in a more effective way? They are doing it, but it's limited, and its implications are very limited. So we need to think of all those things when we bring technology in to the equation. And textbook matter is very easy to teach. We also need to look at the curriculum once more. The curriculum is very limiting. The curriculum is focused on bookish knowledge, which you can get from the net. I think we can streamline our curriculum, not just reduce the amount of curriculum, which is definitely a great direction the government is taking, but also to have this as an opportunity to have those dialogues and discussions with educators pan-India and abroad, bring evidence into it, and teach the skills to think and to learn by self. Because we don't know what the world is going to be like, in 2023 even, post-COVID. And children have to be prepared for the uncertain scenarios.
Now, the role of regulation, like regulation in general plays a huge role, not only in the enhancement of a child, but also the teachers. So how do you think that, the regulators need to change how they evaluate?
Policy is number one in terms of driving change in any domain. And it's really exciting to see the government really lapping up the online opportunity. They have created so many platforms now and are perfecting that. They're making it a collective effort by educators across the country. And I think we can also bring in international forces here. But who are the regulators? So, besides the government, the policymakers, you've got the boards, the different boards that run the examinations. You've got the DIOs, the inspectors of schools, and so forth. I have a feeling that they could play perhaps a more critical role. And that role is not being played to the extent that we really need to drive change. Education has been so far, from the policymakers' side, a blueprint approach. So we make a blueprint like for a building, and then it's for next 15 years, left there to stand by itself. For example, our national curriculum framework was created in 2005, and now in 2020, 15 years later, we are recreating the new education policy, and that's a good direction. But should we not be reviewing it every single year and collectively, making it a living document rather than a static one? So policy can only be useful when there's structures created to follow it up, and incentives created and motivations created for teachers to go and schools to go and implement those changes. So many things we've aspired to, and so many wonderful statements, even in the NCF 2005, we see the teachers don't know about and are not required in a sense to do, so it's not happening as much as it could and should. Then we see that education is not a priority for the government as it ought to be. In my travels across the world, what I've seen, and it's well known also, that the countries that are really doing well academically, that are top rankers in the PISA assessments, for example, say Singapore next door, when you drive through the roads of Singapore, you will see there are signboards, posts all across the city of Singapore saying education is our future. Let's invest in education. For Iceland, it's number one priority. For Finland, it's number one priority. It's always been a number one priority. And since the First World War, they recognize that without education, their country cannot grow. So they put maximum amount of money into education. So policymakers here could make education more important. It should be on the manifestos of all politicians. Is it or is it not? And if not, we need to be doing this. For example, when we talk about literacy, 2 years we can have India literate. We don't have to wait for 20 years, 30 years, gone so sluggishly, so slowly. And it's not even about money, because actually people are ready to go act. People are waiting for doing something innovative and interesting. But where are the forums to engage us? Um, then if you look at regulators from another point of view, which is funding, India has been spending less than 4% of its GDP on education, though there's not in the new education policy, the provision for a 4.6% of GDP. Still, if you look at our defense spending, that's 15.5%. And so it's 1/3 or 1/4 of our defense spending. So where is the priority? Look at Finland. 7% of their GDP is spent on education, ours about 4%. So China, so many countries made education really top priority, and they came up economically as well. So I think that there's so many lessons. I mean, if you look at teacher education, that's another priority from a policy point of view. How about reforming completely the B.Ed colleges? They're still learning a very theoretical agenda. They have practical things there too. But what is the outcome? And we need to focus on that, because no school can outperform the quality of its teachers. So if you want to make India great in education, policymakers have to focus on minimum qualifications of teachers, which should not be less than a master's.
You need to actually have your priorities right, because it is achievable. You just have to look at it in the right light and in the right way, I guess. The last question that I have for you is extremely important, because I would actually like to know your closing comments that, or any piece of wisdom that you would actually like to provide to the youth who might be watching this video and watching you.
Okay, so I'd like to say that we clearly need to reform education, but reform at the core, at the center, not at the margins. And that means profound changes, deeper changes, going back to the drawing board. Second thing I would like to say is we need to use evidence, not hunches. My hunch says let's do this. We experiment at a very big, large scale level. We should allow for DBTs, direct benefit transfers, like we've done for LPG and so many segments. We have ration cards in so many places. We have used direct benefit transfers. Why not in education? This will ensure that the private sector will get the chance to shape up when there's more competition. We've seen this in countries across the world. The education reforms itself. Why are we stuck to non-profit scenarios? Nobody can stick to those. Why not make it for profit? Let's make some bold changes to education. Why not do PPPs with the private sector? Get the schools going in a very different direction. What are the constraints to doing that? I don't know. But we need to have much bolder, broader agenda for education to make all this happen. We need to make obviously learning blended. Looking at the pages of our experience in the last 3 months, it's been phenomenal. The teachers are completely capable. Our children are capable to embrace technology. They've done a tremendous job. So my last parting statement would be, one device, one child, get the infrastructure in place, and we can get India educated and literate and close the learning gaps in no time at all. So this is the investment India needs to make, and we need to make it today.
I think the closing line was an absolute winner. It is so important, not only for the youth, but people in general, to actually know that and understand that whole point. Thank you so much for doing this with us. It was an absolute privilege to have you over here. We would love to have you back. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Really nice to be on this channel with you. Thank you, Mrs. Danji.
Thank you.